I'm Sarah Smith, family doctor, clinical day advisor, and the chatting coach. Welcome back to Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast, where we're going to be interviewing peers or world experts who can help us think about our clinical day in a way that is more sustainable and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. Today we have with us Dr. Kristine Goins. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to a fellow previous nomad anyway. So tell us about you.
So, I am an integrative adult and child psychiatrist, and I've been a digital nomad for 5 years now. And I help other doctors to work less, live anywhere, and replace their hospital income remotely.
There we go. Okay, enough, you guys. This will be fun. Now, tell us about you before you decided to leave the hospital system. Tell us about life up till then. What was going on?
Yeah, like most doctors, I think when I got into my attending years, I was like, okay, finally, I'm gonna have more time and more freedom to travel, which has been one of my life goals since I was a teenager. And when I started working, I realized, oh, this is the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. I had so much more responsibility and training fellows and heading committees, and I really didn't really have the balance, the work-life integration that I thought would come with finishing training. And so I found myself very burnt out. I would have chest pains in between clinics. I started to have tremors throughout my entire body and thought I was developing a neurological disease. My A1C started skyrocketing. I had headaches. I couldn't sleep. So my body was giving me all the signs that this was not the path I was meant to take. There was more breath that I needed. I really have not been the type of person that's okay with taking 2 vacations a year. It's just not enough for me. And so I had a conversation with myself and said, I think it's time for a change. And it was really scary. But I booked a one-way ticket to Colombia, and that became my must-leave date. And I put in a 4-month notice for my job.
Okay, all right. So let's back up a little bit. So the job that you had, the restrictions on you, was that the 2 holidays a year?
Really, they give us 4 weeks a year, but because of all the stress that I was mentioning to my
Hmm.
superior, they stretched it to 6 weeks, which
Okay.
for me was still not sufficient.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. 6 weeks of leave, but this was in the context of you not well, needing really time for you to help recover. How many years at that point had you been outside the other side of residency?
By the time I was feeling that way, it had only been 2 years.
Yeah, okay. And we hear this often. It's not decades into the career necessarily. You come out the other end of residency and you're already at that. I've been grinding and pushing myself to get just the other side of residency. Then the pressure will ease up. And I hear that. And I hear that for you too. So you said you were talking to your supervisor about your physical manifestations of this job. Did you think it was related to the job? Did you know at that point what was going on?
I knew that it was stress related because I eat pretty healthy. I was going to yoga and Pilates. I was doing all of the things, and I've always been really big on preventative care, but the body doesn't lie. You can't hide stress. So I would tell myself it's okay. Everyone else around me seems pretty stressed out too. They're all doing notes on the weekends and at night, and they seem to still be going along just fine, but I couldn't deny what was happening for me.
Absolutely. All right. Tell us, did you have conversations with those doctors who are also, were you working evenings and weekends? Tell us what life looked like.
Life looked like technically I was working, so I was full time in academia. I would spend 4 days 4 days because it was a lot more than that, to be honest. Working in clinics, I worked in 9 different clinics in my academic job throughout the city. So I would be bouncing to different ones even in one day. I
Right.
also was doing private practice work on the side, just one day a week, doing my own consultations.
Hmm.
And on weekends, I would either have call or I'd be finishing documentation. I'd have about 30 notes or so to finish during the
Hmm.
weekend, and I would try to wrap them up just Sunday night so I could start over on Monday with some fresh notes.
Yeah. Okay. Having tried all the things, the two different places of work adds just another layer of woe to your life because now you've got typically, and I don't know what the experience was for you, you have to log into their system to see that inbox. You have to log into this other system to see that inbox. That already is a burden, a mental burden. So tell me about 9 clinics. Was that one big inbox where everything came in, or did you need to now remember to go to each of the 9 clinics to check patient results, consult letters, whatever it was that you had to check off, even what notes are still pending? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So I was working in 6 different schools. And so there was a system that I used for the schools in that area. There was a system that I used for the institution itself in terms of teaching and training and seeing clinics for the institution. But then I was also part of a community partner as the institution. So I had another system I had to log in for 2 community centers that I was also heading. And then the login, the different system for the private practice day. So
Okay. Yeah. Did the
multiple,
clinic
like you said, multiple systems.
Absolutely. Did the clinics each have their own different
They were
portal?
not connected in any
They're
way.
not connected. So you also
Yeah.
have 9 different clinics to go to check what notes are still required and what inbox work is still there. Okay, that's a lot.
Yes, it was a lot.
Okay. Every time we say yes to a responsibility, and we start looking at the time required. There's the staff messages, the inbox, the notes and consultation letters coming in at one clinic, and then you log into the next clinic and you do the same, and then you log into the hospital system and you do the same. You log into that. Yeah, you can see how you're immediately overstretched, especially when there's work that's carrying over into the evening and weekend as well. So yeah. So you're looking at your colleagues. You said your colleagues are also working evenings and weekends. How did you know? Was that part of the conversation as you pass each other in the hallway?
Yeah, I think it's just part knowing them. We were all pretty collegial, close. And so you know that people stay late, you know that they finish notes at home. And I think it was woven into the culture there. It's
Hmm.
like everyone knows that people do this, and it's not really seen as a problem to be
Hmm.
fixed. It's just part of being a doctor, it's part of what we do.
Was that your experience in residency as well, that there was hangover work, or was this something that did it worsen in attending hood or did it get better?
I think it was similar. It was similar in terms of it was part of the culture of just what you
Mhm.
have to do. I think it was different just in terms of the responsibility. You just have different levels of responsibility in attending hood than I think you have in training. But in training, it's also woven into the idea of training. It's like this is the hustle time. This is the time for you to learn. You should be on call every third night. So that's just kind of part of what we did. But it was I think similarly exhausting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so amongst your colleagues, this was the expectation, the familiar, the normal. Did they express to you the miserableness of it? Or because you said they seem to be coping with this okay. We actually ever poke them and say, "Are you okay?" Or did you?
When we did, let's say those kind of more seldom after work chats where you're just chilling at the bar together, talking over
Mhm.
the whole office, people were tired, but there was something about the security of that place that they didn't want to leave, even if they knew they were being overworked, even if they knew they were being undervalued. They just felt like it was a safe place. It was like the devil you know. And there was a lot of fear about uncertainty of what life would look like on the other side.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So then you took the plunge. You said, I'm giving you 4 months notice, which is already risky because we've heard that some doctors who give their 4 months notice being nice will be told don't come Monday. So that's been interesting, just a little reflection that I gave 4 months notice. I booked a one-way ticket. Why Colombia? Tell me about that.
Colombia, because at the time, it was 2021, so we're not that far from COVID. So I wanted to be close enough in case something else broke out that I didn't know about. It was a Spanish-speaking country, and
Hmm.
I have been studying Spanish for over a decade. It had water. I really love
Yeah,
being next to the water, and I
yeah,
like
yeah,
being warm. And
yeah,
then culturally, I knew I was going to see people who looked like me. That was really important to
yeah,
me and in a
yeah.
similar time zone. So I wasn't going all the way to Australia just for I was close enough. So it had multiple elements that even though I was going to a country I had never been to and I was moving there, there was some safety in that experience.
Interesting. Okay, got it. And tell us about your idea then for this digital nomad. I don't know if that's a term that had been previously around. Tell me more.
Growing up, actually, I was always reading these urban novels by an author named Eric Jerome Dickey, and he wrote these fictional books about Black professional polyglots. They would travel all over the world. So in my mind, like since I was like 14, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be one of those women. I didn't know how I was going to do that and be a doctor, but I was like, I guess I'll just figure it out later. And so I think that was always in me. I actually only found out maybe 2 years ago that while he was writing these books, he was nomading and going to a
Mhm,
lot of the same countries that I actually ended up living in. So I think that just stuck with me. And
mhm,
so when I decided that I would leave, it was a natural like idea that there's not just one country I want to go to. I want to see the whole world. So why not spend enough time in a place to develop connections and learn about it, but then
mhm.
also have room to move on to the next.
Got it. Okay. How did you work out what it would look like to see patients via digital means and collect income for that? How did that all happen?
So I had always been doing some kind of hybrid. I would even say from residency, we had some medicine parts of our certain rotations. The same thing with fellowship. So it wasn't like a brand new concept for me. And even when I became an attending, maybe about a year and a half into my position there, we did a lot of hybrid work. So it was always part of what I was doing. And so I think I always had in my mind that there are multiple approaches and ways to provide medicine, especially when we're thinking about more rural communities or communities where it's just much more difficult for them to get into the office. And so it was like a natural outpouring of that, but also recognizing because I left training automatically doing academia, but also doing my own thing on the side, I always had the idea that I could do my own thing. That's also a possibility, is to
Mm.
have that kind of autonomy and decide the kind of work I want to do.
Yeah. With the private clinic, were you inside somebody else's space or had you set up a space for you?
I was in someone else's space. So it was like I was contracting with them under my own LLC, my own professional LLC, and I would contract with another clinic.
Okay. So you were inside their clinic seeing your specific patients, but using their rooms, administrative help, that sort of thing?
But all in all, because we were all contractors, really the patient panel was under their institution. So if I ever was going to leave, it wouldn't be under me to figure out where all these patients are going. The institution would figure it out.
Got it. Okay. It's just helpful to hear. How did you set up that private little part of it? Got it. What about licensing? So you get to Colombia and do you want to see Colombian patients or do you want to see patients from where you had come from?
Only patients from where I had come from. So the way that the law works in those states that I was licensed in is
Hmm.
that if the patient is actually located in those states during the
Hmm.
session, then that's fine. It didn't matter where the physician was located.
Okay, that's
Mhm.
interesting because when I was in Canada, the
Mhm.
minute you, the doctor, left the country, you could not bill for services performed on patients in Canada.
Okay, but I guess you also have a different system because all of my
Mm.
patients were cash based. That's the important part of being able
Mhm.
to do that is that you're not using the insurance-based systems.
Okay, so when you moved out of country, you weren't using insurance at all?
No, because in my private, in any kind of contracting work that I don't use any insurance at all. It's always cash based.
Yeah, because some of the DPC type models, physicians are looking to use insurance and they're setting all of that up.
Mhm.
But it's interesting to hear. The alternative is you don't use insurance and you use cash payments with patients. So there's so many different models to be able to work in. Even in Australia, while typically the law says if I'm outside country, I can't look after Australian patients, it isn't true for the entire country. We have a model in the Northern Territory where doctors overseas are actually helping do overnight call for the Northern Territory rural communities, which is fascinating.
Amazing.
That the legal system is set up in one way, but it isn't truly universal. There are
Mhm.
models. So tell us about now your work with other physicians who found themselves similar to you, just very not enjoying where they're at.
Yeah. So how NomadMD started is as I was nomading around, my friends would start sending me their friends. Like, Christine's doing it. If you really want to travel, they'd be like, oh, I'm an OBGYN. I'm an OBGYN. I don't know what to do. I'm so tired and stressed. And people have been already figuring out certain things. They do locums and then try to leave for a while and then come back, but they really didn't want to have to come back. They really wanted to just be away. And so they would come to me and I helped them figure out ways to start consulting, ways to start digitizing their medical expertise. And after doing that for a while, I was like, I should get paid for this. I should not just keep doing this for free. And that's how it began. Because I think there are so many physicians who really, at the core, love medicine and really don't want to leave it. We all have this passion for the work that we trained so hard to get into, and we spent so much time developing the skill set and expertise. And so I think for most of us, there is something that we really love about it, and we love to stay. We just don't like the structure that we're doing the work in. And once we're able to shift that, whether it's to telemedicine, to consulting, to getting direct contracts with clinics that give you more autonomy over the compensation and your schedule, and even your location of where you can do your work, I think it really changes how we see the work that we do.
See a lot of people feel stuck. Like you were saying about your colleagues who had that job security and it was difficult to envisage anything else when they're in that job security and this is just my life and I just have to take what's given to me. And you're now opening their eyes. All right. So what does it look like to do consulting or see patients on a telemedicine format when they are OBGYN or they are a specialty where there's often a physical exam or some sort of requirement? Tell me some of the models you've seen.
Yeah, so some of the models include, let's say, OBGYNs who actually move more towards women's health. They move more towards menopause, hormones. So they move to different integrative areas where that in-person element is not as necessary for the work that they're doing. For some
Mhm.
people who really love procedural work, even like surgeons that I've worked with, they really don't want to stop that part, but they want to have the flexibility to be able to take 2 or 3 months off and be somewhere else around the world and come back. And for them, they really like a hybrid model. So they can have their office and do procedures and surgeries at certain parts of the year, but also have that tele portion where they're actually doing remote consultations the other parts of the year. And then other people have models where they can actually have another provider who's on site if that in-person element is needed and important for them, and they are monitoring, supervising, and doing the other non-in-person elements. So it just depends on what that physician really wants to do and what their niche is. But I would say for every specialty, and I haven't met any exceptions thus far, whether they're working with patients or whether their client is actually an AI company or another organization or institution, there is no specialty that doesn't have expertise that can work online, that can be digitized.
Interesting. Tell us about how it was to actually move to Colombia and get all set up.
It was so much easier than you would imagine. I sold everything and gave away everything that I had, and I had a carry-on bag and a book bag, and I just left with my computer. It was just that simple. Once I landed, which was about 3 hours later, and I was taking my taxi to my apartment, and the whole ride, I was just staring at the ocean. I was like, I have made the right choice in my life to be here. When I was in the US, I had always thought it was very backwards to work 5 days a week and be off too. So the first thing I did when I left was decide to work 2 days a week and be off five. So
Mhm.
my work life looked like Thursdays, Fridays, I would see patients online, and then the other days I would just be off going to museums, going to yoga, traveling, talking to locals, and just enjoying.
Love it. What about advertising and getting patients to actually book into those days? What did that look like?
That was handled by the organization. So in a lot of contracts, especially when you're doing direct contracts, that's not a part that you have to handle, depending on what kind of contract you have with the organization. So for my contract, all of the marketing and getting patients in, all of that was done by them. All I needed to do was show up and do the clinical part that I care most about.
Okay, so this was under that private place you were working for before you left? Great. Okay, so that means that the electronic medical record is still within the one you were working with before as well.
Yeah, I knew that system. Yeah, I did. I did.
Okay. Did
And
they
I was
collect,
also very well versed in many systems.
did you collect the payment yourself or did the company do that for you as well?
The company, yeah, in direct contract, usually the company will do it for you too. Yeah.
Okay. Had you set yourself up an idea of what it looked like to earn for those 2 days a week and how that would work for paying your apartment and building up money for your next travel, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So what was interesting was that my 2 days a week working for myself was more compensation than me working full time in academia. So it was better for me. I cut my time down by less than a third and I increased my compensation. So it was a perfect scenario, I think. I think a lot of times we consider the stability aspect of working for certain institutions or being an academic is part of our training. So it feels safe. But a lot of times I think the compensation that we get isn't necessarily reflective of the value that we bring. Obviously, there's a big chunk of it that goes to the institution, whereas when you're working with direct contracts or if you're working for yourself in telemedicine, you're getting that revenue or you're setting the charges. So it is very different in terms of like how your compensation is actually reflected in the end.
Was cost of living lower as well where you were?
Yeah, so it was almost like making more, but then getting a raise because my expenses dropped by a third. Yeah, to a third of what I was paying because I was living in the middle of DC. So I was actually
Hmm.
living in a pretty expensive area.
Wow, that's cool. Where else have you lived since then?
Ooh, I don't know if I could remember everywhere, but
Not a
I've lived
problem.
in 16 countries now though. But some of my favorites have been Georgia, the country. I love Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, that area. I enjoyed France, South Africa was amazing, Brazil, Argentina. I've lived in most of Central and South America, Mexico, where I am right now. I'm 2 weeks from being a Mexican resident, so it's one of my favorite places also. But yeah, those are some of Panama. I have
Yeah.
to shout out Panama. Okay.
Did you need to get work visas for those countries given you weren't working in country? How does that kind of work?
I didn't need to, even for here in Mexico, where I'm actually undergoing the legal residency process. What they want to know is that my income is not coming from inside this country. That's what they want to know. And for most countries, that is the main issue is they
Mhm.
don't want someone to come in and be taking jobs and money from the locals there. I think that is really one of the biggest concerns.
Okay, there we go. Just helping brighten our ideas on what are the questions I have about this. It sounds super fun. What other advice do you have for people who are looking to change things up or do something in a different way?
I would say that you really have to tap in with yourself. I don't think that I could have considered this path if I didn't take an hour a week to just think about what I wanted to do next. I was so busy and overwhelmed. I had so much to do that I think I was too exhausted to even think of a plan. And so, one of the things I had done the year before I left is I got my first coach, and they were not a great coach, to be honest. They told me that what I wanted to do was not possible and that I was kind of barking up the wrong tree. But what they did do, which was life changing, is they held space for me for an hour a week. And that was enough time for me to figure out what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it. And I think without taking that time, I might still be there, exhausted, just going with the flow. And so I think there's going to be fear, there's going to be uncertainty on the other side. Maybe it's not what everyone else around you is doing, but everyone else is probably a little bit miserable. So it's going against that grain and allowing yourself space, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day, to just imagine what else could be possible.
Yeah, I like that 'cause that takes you out of the trapped, stuck feeling and more into the I can choose to stay if I choose to, but I have choice around this and I'm allowed to think about this in a different way.
Absolutely, because one of my biggest fears leaving was, well, how am I going to make it work financially? If I'm traveling around the world, how am I going to pay my student loans? How am I going to pay my rent? What about my retirement contributions? There were all of these money concerns and fears. Like I end up broke under a bridge in Colombia. Like I have no one to call. It didn't make sense. It was like the worst case scenario. But when I really thought about it, I stopped catastrophizing the situation. And I asked myself, I said, Kristine, what if traveling will actually be your ticket to fast track yourself to financial independence? How could that be possible? And I think it gave my brain something to do. Our brains like to solve problems. But it started solving it in a different way. Okay, I could use geographic arbitrage. My expenses are going to be lower, but I'm going to live on the beach now. Just these different ways of thinking about what you consider to be a problem, and actually maybe that's your solution. The solution is actually the thing that you want the most.
Fascinating. I love that. All right. So now tell us about you in your 2 days of work when you're working. Is that still the model that you do now?
Now I only do one clinical day because I
What?
coach. Because I coach, I had to keep that less than 20 hours a week work model going.
Okay, so we're doing some coaching of doctors who are trying to figure out how they could be a digital nomad. So
Yes,
one of the,
some are digital nomads, some are living abroad full time in one place, and then some are US or UK based, and then they just like the flexibility of being able to go away with their families for summers, just being able to live where they want when they want, but not have to lose income when they do.
okay, so maintaining income but being able to go and have the life you want to have at the same time. Got
Yeah.
it. And then one clinical day a week. Tell us about the documentation requirements. How does that go? Seeing patients, getting notes done.
Oh, that's super easy. So I finish my note when I'm talking to somebody. So I never have notes. Yeah.
Okay, we love
It's
that. That's
part
what
of
we want
that.
to
Yeah,
hear.
no notes. No notes.
What about inbox management? So looking at emails, looking at patient results coming in, consult letters, anything like that. When do you get that work done in your week?
Honestly, it's not too overbearing. So usually I'll just do it during my day. Maybe I finish a call 5 minutes early. I can whip it up. If I'm talking to the patient, I'll whip it up in the middle of talking to them. Here's the letter. Send it right after. So it really doesn't take up a significant amount of my time. I might have at most 5 to 10 minutes of call for the whole week if there's something really going on with the patient, but it's really infrequent.
Is that initiated by the clinic that you work for? They'll take a message from a patient and let you know, or do you have direct patient to you access?
You can do it either way you want, but I have direct, most of my patients will contact me directly. I'll delegate if it's something that's not clinical, if they're trying to get something scheduled or they have a payment issue or something like that, I'll delegate. But for clinical issues, I want them to contact me directly, and they do.
Okay, there you go. How long have you spent in most places?
3 to 5 months.
Okay.
Yeah, but I go back to some places like Mexico. I've been back here quite a bit. So I try to go back and deepen my roots in my community in certain cities that I really love.
And how long have you been nomading now?
5 years.
Wow. Okay. So there's no going back to Boston.
No going back to the United States unless I'm visiting. My brother's wedding was last week, so I did go back to the United States. But if I'm visiting, that's fine, but I will never move back.
And for those listening, so this is possible. So this whole unleash yourself from the grind of somebody telling you what to do and being able to go and figure this out in your own way. From your perspective, the people you've worked with, have they come in highly motivated? Have they come in skeptical? Kind of what have you seen?
I've seen a myriad of, I think as physicians, we have a similar approach to things. We're very analytical. We can have the motivation, the desire to do something. If it's new, though, and we don't have an algorithm for it, or we don't know that algorithm, there is going to be that apprehension, there's going to be some fear. And so I think most docs come in with all of that. And we just break that down bit by bit because once they see the structure, because there is a framework for how you do it. And once they see that structure and that framework, they're like, okay, so wait, there is an algorithm for this. For the things that I want, there is a way to go about creating this that allows me to replace my hospital income. And I think that it starts to feel some safety in that they really do have that plan and that structure.
I know when I left full-time practice and went locuming so we could travel around Australia, I was working in the first locum place I ever did, and I'd been there a month. And I hadn't had a paycheck. And I had my husband on the call saying, I need to buy the camper that we're going to live in for the next X number of years. You haven't been paid yet. And I'm on the phone to the locum agency saying, is this a scam? Have I just been working my butt off for the last 4 weeks and I'm never going to get paid? What is going on? I hadn't really knuckled down the fact that they pay once a month and the pay was like a few days away. I'm like stressed out. We used up all our savings to get the truck purchase that we needed. Now we need the camper. My husband, two small children packing up the house. I'm way, way away doing a locum going, I was promised this and I haven't seen anything of it. What the heck is going on? It was all fine in the end.
Wow.
But
Wow.
that initial moment of, what have I done?
Hmm.
was
I
soon
feel like we
replaced
all
with,
have
this is
those moments.
amazing.
So it's wonderful to hear. Not alone.
Not alone, no. But then the ability to be able to be with the family, go do fun things, see new places and destinations, and figure out, okay, I need to work again because I need more fuel and groceries. Where can I go work for a week? Love it. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for this conversation, Kristine. Hopefully, this has given a few people who are listening the opportunity to think outside their current box and current situation. How long do you think it took you to reverse the effects of what you were physically noting about being in the work situation?
It probably took me about 4 to 6 months. Yeah.
Interesting.
Just to
Yeah.
rest.
Yes. It's interesting to hear because I was wondering if it took you 5 full minutes when you were reached the beach. But you're
Oh,
like,
this is
you're like,
different.
listen, I was working hard. I had all these physical symptoms of me in my stress situation. I left everything. I moved to the beach, and it still took Kristine 4 to 6 months.
No, I think it definitely takes time for everything to dissipate. It happened little by little, but I would
Hmm.
say the dread that I felt over my life happened that lifted before I ever left. It
Hmm.
lifted as soon as I put in my 4 months because I knew I didn't have to deal with this much longer. And I changed the way that I was even operating in my day-to-day life, where something I would have taken on when people requested things of me, I said, I don't have the bandwidth for that, but you know what? It would be great for Susie to do it. She would love that opportunity. And so I was moving completely different, and I noticed feeling lighter even before I left.
Mm. And that's interesting because if you had decided to stay but took on that mentality, you would have already felt a bit lighter with that. Nothing else really changed. But interesting to hear that it took 4 to 6 months because I think people still have that. Like you said, they gave me an extra 2 weeks to get over it or an extra 2 weeks of annual leave to feel better. And you're saying, no, I moved to the beach, I sold everything, I got rid of all my responsibilities, and it took 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. And I think for me, it was like to feel fully rested, to feel, not to feel joy or happy or, yeah, I'm free. I don't have anything to do, like that piece. But even just some of the tremors that I would feel sometimes for my body to get to feel safe and regulated all over again. Yeah, I think we underestimate like how powerful and how impactful that burnout is and how long it really takes to let go. Having a week-long vacation, that's why we know we don't solve it with that. We go back into the same condition and it's like we never left.
Yeah. All right. How do people find you if they're looking to connect?
They can find me on Instagram at thenomadmds.com, on Facebook at thenomadmds.com, or on my website, thenomadmd.com.
Perfect. And anything we didn't talk about that we should talk about before we end? Just giving you opportunity to think about
Um,
anything I didn't ask you.
yeah. No, I would just say if you have this, any kind of passion, if you have a small, still voice that is telling you that you need to make a move, listen to it.
Love that. Thank you so much, Kristine, for this conversation. And everybody, you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, if you found this podcast episode helpful, I would encourage you to like and subscribe. Every time you do, you help a colleague or friend find our podcast and it can help them too. Don't forget to share it along with your friends. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget we have charting champions for physicians and smarter charting for nurse practitioners and other clinicians to help you get home with your work done. We are helping you create sustainable clinical medicine. Thanks for listening.